Hello, my spooky scaries, and welcome back to an all new episode of The Final Pod, where I, your host, Ezra Rivers, talk all things spooky all the time. Before we get into today's episode, be sure to give the show a rate and subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is The Final Pod YT, and follow the show on Instagram at The Final Pod. Today, we are delving into the extraordinary world of Maxine Minx. Now, fair warning, I haven't had a chance to get to the theaters and see Maxine, so this episode will not be about the latest entry in the trilogy, but I will be talking about X and Pearl, respectively. And a little fun addition that I have to fill you guys in on is I am currently knee-deep in writing my first horror novel trilogy. Yes, I have decided to write a book, and then in the process of thinking of this book, I thought of 3 different books that can kind of go into a trilogy. If you're into slashers, imagine like Friday the 13th. I'm not sure why I stuttered. Friday the 13th meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and get ready to visit the farm. Yes, that's the title of the first book, and trust me, I've got all 3 mapped out and outlined. I'm stoked to deliver a terrifyingly fun ride with characters that I hope you'll love, and kind of really get into their world and get into this thing that I have brewing in my head before the madness kind of begins. I don't want to give too much, but I've already started writing. I have, as I said, I have it all mapped out and outlined. I know exactly how book 1 is going to flow and end, and how it'll lead into book 2, which then will come all together for this big, crazy, epic kind of finale in book 3. And yeah, I don't know if you can hear me smiling, but yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's really the second time now that I am going to kind of really put myself into the writer's seat and work on a big project. A couple years ago, I had a book deal with a publishing company that was like up and coming. It was a starter company. It was very new, but they had produced content and books, and there were authors signed, and these books were getting released, and I found my way to them, and they took me in, and I worked on production of kind of like a horror anthology series, very much like American Horror Story, where like we'd get this first book, which would then excuse me, either carry some characters from the first book into the second book, or just really be in the same world and in the same universe, but be completely different entities on their own. And it was really fun. Like I want to say maybe a year I spent writing a book that was supposed to be, now, okay, I'm going to show my age as a 90s baby, yes. If you ever read like the Goosebump books, there were some of them that had like I forgot what it's called, but you'd basically be reading a page, and then it would say like, oh, it's like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. And so you'd read a page, and then at the bottom of that page it would say like flip to page 80 something or whatever if you want to choose this option to lead the story in. And so basically I wrote like 2 versions of the same book and the same story to give the reader 2 different paths to follow, which would ultimately lead to this finale that had 2 different endings. And needless to say, it didn't happen. So the company they were not giving my work what I thought it deserved and what it needed. And if you write, if you do podcasting, if you're a content creator, whatever, you know that what you create and what you put your heart into, you hold so dear to yourself. And I was getting the runaround. I was getting like, oh, it's going to be released this day, it's going to be released that day, and then the day never came, right? It was always something, but it was never me. Like they would never say that like the writing wasn't good or it needed editing or this or this. It just wasn't being put out. And so I ended up parting ways, kept the rights to the story, have tried to rewrite this story for years, and I just have not felt connected to it. And I don't know if it's just kind of been tainted. And if it has, that's okay. I will always hold it in the vault. maybe one day it'll see the light of day. Case in point, this goes to say that this has led me to The Farm. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna give very much, like I said, slasher vibes. You're gonna get the horror tropes. You're gonna get the spooks and the scares and the horror and the gore and the whatever. You're gonna get it all. But yeah, so that's something that I'm working on the side. I'm excited about it. It's already starting to happen, and I'm hoping that I can get it published one day. So we'll see. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up. Enough about me. That's not why you're here. You're not here to talk about my book or listen about my book. Yeah, let's get into the episode. Okay, so quick little spoiler alert warning. As always, I do like to prepare my listeners that what I'm going to be talking about, if it's something as far as specific movies instead of a genre or a topic, I like to put a little spoiler warning. So yes, from this point on, this episode will contain spoilers for both X and Pearl. If you haven't seen them yet, pause the episode, go check them out. They're definitely worth it. They're great. And then come back. Or if spoilers don't really scare you, I guess happy listening. So I'm going to start this with, I'm not going to review or talk about the movies as far as chronologically. As I know, Pearl is technically in the timeline first, and then X, and then we get Maxine. But that's not how I watched them. And that's not how they were released. So I think it'll be fun to kind of do it how it was done. So we'll start with X, right? T.I. West, love him. If he's going to keep bringing us horror movies like these, I'm here for it. He brings us the first movie, which is X, and the trilogy, which is X, Pearl, and Maxine. Well, Pearl, X, Maxine. The movie is very much a slasher. It is what it is upon first watch, without, the context of Pearl, without knowing the universe really that T.I. West is building and creating. It works as a standalone slasher film. It's very in the nature of that standalone genre. Basically, if we didn't know it was going to be a trilogy and it just came out, it completely stands alone as its own. It centers around a group of inspiring filmmakers and actresses who are looking to shoot a pornographic movie on site of an elderly couple's home in Texas. Now, I know you're thinking, kind of sounds like a hypersexual version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yes and no. So we're introduced to Maxine, who was played by Mia Goth, Lorraine, who's played by Jenna Ortega, Bobby Lynn, who's played by Brittany Snow, Jackson, who is played by Scott Mescudi, or as we know him as Kid Cudi, Wayne, played by Martin Henderson, and RJ, who was played by Owen Campbell. This is the cast of, young filmmakers and actresses, and this is the core group of the film. It's a pretty stacked up cast, if you ask me. I mean, if you've watched really any movie in the last 2 decades, then you know who someone on this cast is. I mean, Jenna Ortega's done Wednesday, Scream. You know who these people are. Brittany Snow, Mia Goth. You know who Kid Cudi is. We all know him. And so yeah, I think on the basis alone of the cast, it works to sell. I know I was sold from seeing off rip like Brittany Snow. I'm a huge fan, and I love when she dabbles into horror. I know she's kind of more of like the comedy. We have like John Tucker Must Die. But she also did like Prom Night, which was really good for what it was worth. It needed more blood. Anyway, you know who the cast is if you've watched any of the movies that anyone's put out in the last couple years. So like I said, it's already off to a good start. I saw that cast and I was like, that's solid as fuck. I'm excited. I like who's in it and what they've done already, so I was already sold off the cast. And then obviously it's a slasher. If you know me, you know I love a slasher movie. And as I said, it stays true to the slasher concepts and everything that makes a slasher movie fun. And yeah, I thought it was really. I remember like watching the trailer and seeing the buzz around it, and just being like, it's funny because it's a pornographic movie set in a horror movie, and everyone knows like the whole rule of horror is like don't have sex and whatever the case may be. So I thought like the whole parallel of that was cool. And then I was, as I said, cast, done. So the group travels to the property, and it's very clear that something's off, and we kind of get the gist that Wayne hasn't told the property owners what they're actually going to do there. And once they arrive, there's a weird vibe. Everyone's kind of not feeling it, but Wayne is, insistent that they're going to film. Everything's going to be okay. He's going to pay, the couple, whatever the case may be. And it's supposed to just be pushed to the side, right? Not the case, obviously. Moving on from there, we kind of get... Well, no, we don't kind of get. We do get. We get the sex scenes, and I, for one, don't care for nudity being here nor there. I understand what it does in the horror genre. I understand how it's a part of it, so I don't hate it. And I actually think the sex scenes in this movie are pretty funny. I think Brittany Snow, if I'm correct, there's one scene where she's filming a sex scene, and it always gets me because she's so overacting and then underacting at the same time in one scene. And it's a good juxtaposition of like the comedy within the movie that they're filming, and then also the movie that you're watching, right? And it's funny to see, you've got Jenna Ortega, who's supposed to be like the quiet, shy girl, and she's like in the room with them. And I think it's an interesting and it's a funny nod to filmmaking and how people take in the scene as it's being filmed, and something that we don't really see firsthand, as we're watching these behind the scene documentaries or whatever the case may be. They're not necessarily standing there and showing us the behind the scene of that certain type of scene. So I think seeing both of that in one was really cool, and it was interesting, and it adds to the comedy, right? You're making a porno on a farm with an elderly couple, and you don't even know the shit that's about to go down. So it's basically a movie within a movie when you think about it, because there are scenes where we are seeing what RJ is filming on the camera. So I thought that was cool. It gives us the parallel of like reality and fiction, and kind of like what's really going on within the world, in the universe. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a cool aspect. It was different. It wasn't 2024 group of teens or college students going and filming on iPhones, but it was like that modern feel of the characters controlling what's being shot, while also giving that whole feel of the era that it's in, because it's not shot on a high studio camera or whatever, the high technology that we have today. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of aspects in the film, and I think there's a lot of things that T.I. West does perfectly when it comes to bringing us into this world and it feeling very present and of time, but also being a timepiece. So I think that's really fun. I really like it. Yeah, as I said, the movie fits into the typical slasher genre. It's a group of people visiting some unknown place and encountering a batshit ton of problems. But it works. Like, it works and still feels fresh and new and of time, while also being a period piece. It's so weird how my brain works and says whatever the fuck it thinks. Anyway, the movie proceeds on with them trying to kind of still film and figure out what's going on, but then obviously we get Pearl and Howard, who are just running amok, trying to kill him. And everyone in the group does eventually die towards the end. And I know that is a big spoiler. Well, besides Maxine, obviously, because she's our final girl, and we see her escape at the end of the movie after killing Pearl, which then leads into Maxine, the movie Maxine, which is the continuation of Maxine's journey after X, even though it came after Pearl. We'll get into that. Yeah, I thought the movie was fun. I've definitely seen it a couple times, and it's a movie that I can go back and watch over and over again because, well, I think the cast really drives it home. I think Mia Goth is like a real horror star, and she captivates and demands every scene that she's in, which truly, for me, is what a scream queen is. It's not just about the scream, it's about what you bring to the genre, and I think she can play a villain. I think she can play a final girl. I mean, she's done both, clearly, with X and Pearl. And I truly want and hope to see more of her in this genre. Jenna Ortega obviously is, mini new generation scream queen. I would love to see her in more horror. I think it was cool to see her play like a quieter, more reserved role versus, Wednesday or Tara and Scream. So it was cool to see her, more to herself with this character, but also still have her moments. If you've seen it, there's this scream that she lets out after finding the corpse in the basement, and I remember it just being so loud in the theater, and she's definitely Scream Queen, behavior. Again, the movie ends with Maxine escaping, and then we get, today, which just came out beginning of July, Maxine, which follows her story and kind of ends the trilogy. Or from what I'm hearing, whispers around the block is that there may be still room for another movie. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, and I'll definitely get back with that. But let's jump into Pearl. So T.I. West released X, and then he released Pearl in the same year. So with Pearl, and if I lose you at any point, I'm very sorry. I'm going to do my best to explain this. So Pearl is the elderly woman in X who is the villain and the bad guy. Well, one of them. And the movie Pearl tells her backstory and gives us an inside look as to kind of what drove Pearl mad, essentially, and why she was the way she was in X with her connection to Maxine. I remember watching X at first and being like, Pearl is kind of giving me like it was feeling very supernatural, almost like they were connected in another way than what was just being shown on screen. I'm not sure if Maxine goes further into that, if we get more about her connection to Pearl, besides it being the same actress, and because of that, Pearl, when she was younger, is a young Mia Goth, right? So I get all of that whole stuff, but it was interesting to see her, a younger version of her, and then kind of understand where she was. And that's not to sit here and like say, oh hey, let's defend the psycho killer, but I always love when we get a backstory that does, I don't want to say doesn't humanize. I don't like when we get movies where we have a horror villain and then we get a movie that is supposed to soften them or make us like feel bad for them. It just doesn't work for me, right? Like, I want my villains to be villains. I want them to be scary. I don't want them to be like, oh, but he was so sheltered and so hurt as a child, and like, cool, but I just like thinking that someone just fucking goes mad and loses their shit and does crazy shit. I think that's scarier than giving me this whole sob story, right? I feel like with Pearl, we got the story, but we didn't get a sob story. Like, in it, Pearl is a victim to her surroundings and her life and her parents, and wanting and having this drive to be more than what she's in. I get it. But it doesn't make her this weak, sad, sobby, oh, let's hold her, before she loses her mind. Like, at no point in this movie did I look at Pearl and I was like, oh my God, she's like this sad, battered little chicken who like needs me to pick her up. No, I thought she was very strong-willed. She knew what she wanted and she knew how to get it, right? And I mean, was it the right way? That's subjective to listener, right? I mean, if you think this was the right way to go about becoming famous, she technically does become famous at some point, because I'm pretty sure Maxine is going to cover the events of X, which are going to bring up Pearl, right? So I mean, she does reach stardom at some point in some way, but that's very subjective to you, right? I don't think she went about it the right way. But as I said, it was more of a movie that gave clarification rather than giving excuses. And I feel like that's why it worked so well for me. Yes, we see that she is a product of her environment and kind of this unstable obsession with being a star. But it doesn't, and I feel like at no point was I ever like, oh no, poor little Maxine. Like, I was like, hey, this girl knows what she wants. She knows how to get it, and she's a fucking psychopath, and I'm here for it. Like, I remember the girls being like, Pearl is my spirit animal, and I get it. It was relatable. That's so sad to say. Anyway, it also it painted a beautiful picture of why Pearl was so kind of envious of Maxine. Not only does she look like her, in Pearl's mind, she resembles her and everything that she didn't have. She has this young, beautiful, upcoming actress who is filming a movie on her land, let alone a pornographic movie, let alone a sex movie, and embracing her body and really kind of becoming, I could guess that like that's what Pearl wanted to be, and because she didn't get it and she didn't have it, you now want to take it from someone else, right? It's happened. People do it all the time. Let's be real. And it's a big thing in horror as well. The whole jealousy, rage, kind of what pushes someone too far. And I think when you see Pearl in X and how she's kind of withering away and she doesn't feel sexy, even though she still has the sexual desire that we learn about in Pearl. She can't do it, right? She's old. Like, I don't know if her man could get it up. I don't know if she could do whatever she needs to do, right? So it gave us a lot of needed information about what the fuck happened in X, why the fuck it happened in X, and didn't do it in the way that made anyone feel disconnected from the story. I don't know. I thought it was just really well done, and it's fun. And again, Maya Goth does fantastic scenes. She gives hell of long monologues that I don't even understand how she went on and on for, and she really puts the psycho in psychotic. You know what I mean? Like, she really brings to life both of these characters. And I think I'm not one for filming scenes. I'm not one for one actor playing two roles, especially in the same film, TV show, whatever. I think it becomes a little messy if it's not done right. It looks funny, it looks weird, but I think because she's so heavily under prosthetics and she looks completely different, you never feel like it's the same person. And I think she's a fucking fantastic actress. Like, I don't know, I'm really here for her. I'm loving the trajectory that she's on. I'm having a lot of fun with her roles. I think she's a great addition to the genre. And I will just say, if anyone is listening and thinking about remaking The Shining and wants someone who looks like Shelley Duvall, may she rest in peace, please hire Miss Goth. because if you look at the picture, she looks just like her. And I think if we're looking for that and we're rebooting something and want people to look how the original characters look, please hire her. Or if you're doing a biopic, please do it respectfully and hire Mia Goth. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, right. So I think this series is very well thought out. I think it's one of my favorite series that I've watched and kind of been a part of and really followed and stayed with and have been excited for every new entry. I don't think anything that's been put out as far as the series goes, especially, has felt repetitive or overdone. You know, we got a slasher for X, we got a backstory slasher with Pearl, and then Maxine brings us into a new era and timepiece of slashers. So I'm excited for that as well, as I've said. And yeah, I just think, you know, there's a whole ton of reasons why I love this franchise, this series, whatever you want to call it. But for me, I think what stands out the most is the cohesiveness and the way the story's been told. I think it's made us want to follow. You know, you watch X and then you're like, who is this woman? What's going on with her? So it brings you in and it makes you want to watch Pearl. And then with Pearl, you get the full story. So then you kind of want to go back and watch X again. And then watching X makes you obviously want to watch Maxine to finish the story. Like, it's done so well, and it's done with a lot of fun. And I think that's what horror these days is missing a lot of. It's the fun, it's the humor and the jokes, it's the over dramatics of, you know, Maxine's statement of I will not accept the life that I do not deserve, you know, and she's a fucking star, you know, and all these big moments that are supposed to be campy and fun. And I think a lot of horror takes itself too seriously, and I think T.I. West and this series has a perfect balance of telling the story, getting your point across, making sure that everything's in there that the fans want and the people want, but also just having a lot of fun with it. And I think that's what makes it work, and that's why people are coming out for these movies and watching them and streaming them and buying them and whatever the case may be, because you can always go back and watch them and just have fun. And I think that's what is so great about this series, and I think that's why I like it so much. Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think they just make sense. You know, I'm getting a little over like watching a movie, hearing about a sequel or a trilogy that's in the works, and like nothing makes sense, right? Or it just being like clear cash grabs. No shade to the Screen Production Company, but I am throwing shade towards you guys. With Scream as a perfect example. At this point, let it go. Like, I loved 1 through 6. I have memories with them. They're a part of the genre that I've grown up into and with. But like, enough is enough already at this point. We tried to do the core 4, and we tried to have that like emergence of a new rebirthed world, but clearly it's not working. You guys fired Melissa Barrera, which is throwing the shit into the shitter, and at this point nothing makes sense, right? Like, let's just let it go. And I think that's why this series and trilogy works for me, because everything makes sense. Every movie that comes out makes sense to the story that's being told in the grand scheme of things. It's not just shock value, it's not just money, or at least doesn't come off like that, right? Everyone in these movies on the cast, they say that they've had a great time, great experiences, they love it, they respect it, so it feels genuine. And you can tell that T.I. West is not just making movies to make movies. He's putting out stories and he's putting out storylines that make sense within a set of movies or media, whatever you want to call it. And I love it. I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer. It's telling a story. It's horror with a purpose. That's what I live for. Yes, cool, fun, gory, stupid horror is, you know, cool, but I like a story. I'm a storyteller. I like being invested in something, which is why I'm more of like a series person. Whereas books or movies, TV, I like things that are long lasting. If you know me, you know that any show that I watch needs to have at least 5 seasons, or I'm not going to watch it because 1 or 2 just doesn't do it for me. Anywho's, as I said, the story unfolds beautifully for me. I've enjoyed these first 2 movies. I'm really excited to watch Maxine when it comes to video on demand. I think it comes out next week on the 2nd, or maybe it's like a week and a half, whatever. I'm excited to see that for sure. I'm excited to close it out. I'm also looking forward to seeing how people think that the movie can continue. I'm a sucker for trilogies. I think let's give us 3 cohesive stories that make sense and end it. But I also love a franchise, right? Just when it stops making sense is when it's like too much. But I'm excited for Maxine. I'm looking forward to it. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to say else about these. I think these are 2 great movies. I think T.I. West is a genius. I can't wait to see what else he does in horror, even if he continues with this. But if we're going to continue, then just give us like 4 or 5 and then drop it. Done. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. You've spoken, and clearly I've listened. X and Pearl just had their moment in the spotlight, and boy, did they shine like 2 serial killers in the lineup. Now it's Maxine's turn to strut her stuff. Once I watch it, I'll be getting an episode out with my review for that. So, yeah, in about the next week or so, we'll get the Maxine review up and we'll chat. If you've had a blast, and let's be honest, who hasn't? I know you have. Show the podcast some love by rating, hitting that follow button, and subscribing faster than you can say boo. Stay in the loop on Instagram at The Final Pod, because trust me, you won't want to miss a single eerie update about the show and my first book, The Farm. Remember, lost souls, always stay spooky.